what we know is that our bodies evolved in nature, not in boxes, and not in buildings. And so even if you have a very beautifully um, decorated or well appointed or well designed space that makes you feel calm in it, just looking at some green space, has a physiologically measurable effect on us. And even if you're unconscious about it, which is one of the reasons why I like having plants in the home.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however, emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Welcome back to the Give a Heck podcast. I'm your host, Dwight Heck, here to help you live life on purpose, not by accident. Each week, we dive into real stories, raw truths, and powerful conversations that challenge you to give a heck about your life and the lives of others. Today's guest is Talor Stewart, a licensed architect with over 25 years of experience. His book, Conscious Home Design, has hit #1 bestseller in 7 countries, specializing in single and multi-home family homes and international communities. He works with clients across the United States and internationally. He also offers a certification program for other designers and architects to learn the conscious home design method, helping them apply life-changing principles wherever they are. You can also find out more by visiting conscioushomedesign.com. Talor, welcome to Give a Heck. I am excited to dive into your work and principles behind, conscious home design.
Sure. Hey, Dwight, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. I'm looking forward to a great conversation, getting into some interesting content that people can really, help them create that mind-body environment connection.
Oh, that's fantastic. Like I said to you before we hit record, going through your website, looking at your book. Obviously, I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but skimming through your book and looking at your workbook, I was very impressed on how you discuss the values of people and ask good questions to find out what works for them, what can work for them. Most people, even in my industry, don't ask enough great questions. So your workbook is a fantastic value add. Obviously, people have to put the effort in to do it. It's no different than me having questionnaires for my clients and asking them questions about their values and what's their goals. Not enough people put that effort in. So thank you for sending that stuff ahead of time so I was able to review it. Listeners, buckle up. People watching, you're going to get some great value on what you can do and utilize within your environment that you live in, right? Think about how many hours you
Yeah,
spend in your home. It's something that we don't take
right.
serious enough, right? So we will talk about all of that and more. Tell me a little bit about your origin, Talor. What happened in your life, from your earliest recollections that you're willing to share to where you are today? Was there something specific that happened or stories you could share that would let people into your world, and how you got to where you're at?
Sure. Well, I think it was always it was a natural inclination, space making, place making for me, as I mean, even to earliest childhood, my favorite activities were the block corner, and setting up little villages and worlds, And as I got older and started playing with, action figures and stuff, I noticed, a lot of friends, whether they were male or female, when they're playing with their figures, they would usually make them do stuff. Like they would have conversations, or they would go on adventures together, and they would animate the toys. But for me, what I found was most satisfying, and I certainly engaged in that kind of play with friends, but I actually preferred just I could spend a whole week setting up this elaborate, scene where I would, dig the trenches and build the forts and the tree houses and get everything going, and then I'd put all the little figures in the perfect position, and I would just set the stage, and once I got it there, then I would step back and I would just appreciate it. I would just look at it and take it all in and just look at it. And I didn't actually, for me, the play was setting the scene, not actually making them engage, And so as an architect, someone who says, "Hey, what's everyone going to be doing here? What activities do you want to facilitate?" Then we'll shape the space for that, and then it's hands off. It's up to you to go live happily ever after. And so that sort of was a natural inclination for me. I was always good at drawing, and I used to do sketching with, graph paper and stuff even as a kid. And I got into woodworking and carpentry pretty early on, but it wasn't until well, it was quite a while before I realized that I was going to become an architect. I actually took a break between high school and college because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I did a bunch of traveling around. I've been to every state but Alaska and all across Canada, and just doing adventuring and stuff. And during that time, I started a drum building company. I was really inspired by the hand drums of the West African traditions, and so I designed a line of 9 different drums that were based on those that I made and wholesaled to about 65 stores, and also did trade shows and festivals and fairs. And so I lived this very sort of maker, craftsman, bohemian lifestyle of, make it and sell it, make a batch of drums and then hit the road and go open up new wholesale accounts or go to festivals and sell them and meet people. It was a very, fun, cultural, integrated lifestyle. But after a couple of years of that, I knew that I was passionate about it and I loved it, but I knew that it wasn't going to be the focus of my life. I said drumming and drum building and music and dance, and that can be a cornerstone of my life, but it can't be the entire foundation. There's more to it than that. And so I ended up selling that company and hitting the road for another 2 years. Kind of like this walkabout, where I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to just go, you know, figure it out, and try to find myself a little bit. And it was suddenly during that process where, I actually have a very spiritual outlook. And I thought, well, I could go join an ashram somewhere and meditate for enlightenment. But I actually wanted the richness of a creative life. I wanted relationships. I didn't want to be a hermit, for my life. And I thought that I would be happier if I stayed in the world and contributed. And I thought, well, yeah, if you're going to stay in the world, you have to add value. You have to be you've got to do your part. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And suddenly the light bulb went off. It was like, oh, of course, I'm going to become an architect. It's always been there. I just hadn't saw it before. And it was like everything, all the activities, the loves and fun and passions that I had in life from snowboarding. Like I even entertained as a teenager a brief moment of being a pro snowboarder. This was back in the day when it was more real, more realistic. You had to be less of an acrobat that back then to do it. But I went through many explorations, and when I swept off all the stuff that was on the table of my life, I found that the table itself was architecture, if that makes sense. That analogy. It was like I couldn't see what my true purpose or my true sort of mission or dharma in life was, because it was cluttered up with all these other activities that I thought were fun, drumming and traveling and snowboarding and whatever. But really architecture was it. So at 25 years old, I went back to college. And yeah, so that's sort of a little bit of the journey to starting my clarity on architecture. And architecture it's not an easy path. It takes a long time. First, it's many years of schooling, followed by many years of apprenticing. Which is required to get your hours in before you can even be allowed to sit for the exams and pass. And the exams are another thing. many questions over months of study. Not easy. It took me many years to get licensed. Um, but I always knew I was going to write a book. I wasn't going, I didn't go back to school for job training, specifically. I went to be, to carve a new path. I'm a little bit of a pathfinder, and I wanted to bring my unique perspective into the built environment. And I always knew I was going to write a book, even from my college days. But it took me 20 years. I didn't publish the book until um, 2019. And so it was only after 20 years of experience that I was able to really gel everything and consolidate, because when I first sat down to write a book, I had a 50-page Google Doc from all of my notes and wake up at 3 a.m. with a brainstorm that I had it down, and even some concepts from old college papers. I had just assembled over the years all this stuff and scribblings from my notebook that I had typed and transposed into digital format. And I was looking at this thing, and I was like, how am I going to make sense of all this? And a friend of mine told me, um, who had done some professional editing work, she said, well, why don't you take every unique concept or idea that you have and put it on a 3x5 index card and lay it out on a table and see if you can, rearrange them to make a storyline, and make some coherence. So I thought that's a great idea. So that's what I did. But when I did that, I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, no one on earth is going to want to read a 42 chapter book on architecture. How boring, it's like, and I said, my goal is not to create a textbook for young architecture students. My goal is to create a bridge between the profession and the community, because what architects do is very esoteric, and it's sort of mysterious. People don't really understand the depth of knowledge. And architecture is an extremely broad field, just like law or medicine. You can specialize. So not all architects are created equal. We have our different focus points. And so I really wanted to just sort of lay it out in a way that was very accessible. The book, I didn't want to have a lot of jargon in there. I worked very hard to make it an easy read. I remember Mark Twain writing a letter to a friend. Hey, I would have wrote a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time, and I put the time in to write to uh, you know, have a book that you could read in about an hour, and then I hired someone with a dual master's. They had a master's in social work and a work, and they're a psychotherapist. They do counseling. And I had this person, read the book, and then together we worked to create the workbook. And you hit on it a little bit earlier. The quality of your question determines the quality of your answers and your results. And if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers. And so, everyone, if they're thinking about, hey, I'm shopping for a new home, or I want to build a new home, or I just need to rent something, whatever, when someone's looking at a transition in their home life, um, everyone has their wish list, and that's great. Your wish list is valuable because these are things that you've identified as being important or being necessary to you. And whether it's because it's a goal that you want or something you've experienced that you didn't like before and you're trying to run away from that, you're however you get to your list, it's meaningful and personal to you. However, I find that there's like actually a secret list with things, the questions that most people have forgotten to ask or didn't know to ask in the first place because they don't live and breathe. They haven't gone so far down the rabbit hole of architecture as I have. So it was about, hey, let's make sure that we leave no stone unturned and we extract the right answers out of people by asking them the right questions. So that's really what that was about, is to really help people, because I know, Dwight, you're very intentional in your life, and you guide your clients to be intentional too, right? Because we all want to feel like our destiny is in our hands. Life is big. It's bigger than us. Stuff happens, lot of things are out of our control. So where we do have control, where we are able to offer guidance, it serves us to take control of those things. It's like surfing. You have to surrender to the ocean. The ocean's big, those waves are powerful. We're not in charge of that. Our job is to show up and do our part. Get on that surfboard, practice our balance, know when to carve and turn, right? And so there's a give and take. There's an element of surrender in life, but also an element of self-determination. So conscious home design is about helping people determine what they can. It's so deep. There's so much we could talk about. There's so many examples, but I just want to pause and we can,
Yeah,
if
that
you have
was
any comments or feedback on that before I just go on. I'm trying to paint a big sort of 10,000-foot view so you see the whole landscape before we zoom in on details and action steps that anyone can apply in their own situation.
yeah, I get what you're doing. You're also though it can be overwhelming for people listening because you're going into all the book and stuff, which we haven't even discussed some of the principles behind why what you do is important, right? The book
Okay.
is great. That's the end result that we want to make sure people are aware of. But what about things within your origin? Like you talked about home design and how in depth and how there's different facets of being an architect. Some people focus on different things and people don't
Hmm.
necessarily appreciate what an architect can do for them, right? So in order for us to get more in depth to that, I'd like to know some other things about yourself. Like you talked about going to school, you talked about, going across Canada. So you went across Canada and went across the US and you've traveled a lot. When you look
Hmm.
back at those moments, were there things now that when you decided to become an architect and then you said you had to work under people became before you became licensed to be on your own, were there things that you look back at that were actually triggered for you when you did your travels, when you were that movable like person that wanted to be a discoverer, a nomad, whatever you want to call it?
Hmm. 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 Yeah. Sure. I never lived in one home for more than 2 years, so I had a lot of chances to see different homes and different architectural styles and um, different layouts. And a lot of um, what drove conscious home design was the fact that homes were largely unconsciously designed. They were really, I found that they're designed based on just shelter, just this concept of, hey, if you give people a place to sleep and a place to prepare some food and a bathroom, then that's it. And people are left to fend for themselves to actually live, be happy, right? And so um, we have learned so much about the science of human excellence and happiness, but architecture, by and large, has not incorporated what all the other fields of science have brought to us. We're still designing homes the way we did, last century, in the 1900s, and though they're more energy efficient and some new construction materials, some technologies have changed. Instead of using plywood, people are using oriented strand board, OSB or zip panel you may see. So some of the building materials, the technologies are changing, but we're still building the same thing: bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom. And it's still the floor plans haven't changed much. Styles have changed. Once upon a time it was, well, and everything's beige, and then everything turned and now everything's gray. And like, so the different styles change and the technology has changed, but uh, we're really not incorporating stuff. And so think about, so most of my things came out of frustrations, right? It was me finding the limitations and finding that uh that four walls boxing me in didn't allow me to live my fullest life. And so I really liked the traveling lifestyle because I had more opportunity for spontaneity or adventure, or to feel unrestricted. But at the same time, I also had a lack of ability to accomplish certain things. Think about the most famous painting in the world, Dwight. It's the Mona Lisa from Leonardo da Vinci. And it took him It's the Mona Lisa, by the way, just turned 500 years old, right? He started painting it in the early 1500s. So this thing is, stood through the centuries, but it took him more than a decade to paint that. He didn't sit down and do it in a weekend or in a week. And when I found that out, I thought this is the perfect example for what I'm talking about with conscious home design because um, without architecture, all of our human advancements in science, in art, in medicine, in technology, none of them would really be possible without the ability to control our environment and dedicate space to our activities. You know, if we didn't have architecture, then the limit of what you could accomplish would really have to be contained within what you could do in a sunny afternoon. Because as soon as the weather changed, or the wild animals came, or hostile neighbor tribes came, or whatever, they'd mess everything up, right? So the ability to control our space and create um, a controlled environment allows us to build on yesterday's achievements. And so um, Leonardo da Vinci would not have completed the Mona Lisa if he didn't have an art studio, because, you know, when he wasn't having inspiration or he was busy with other projects, he was able to put that thing away. And then when it was time, when he got inspiration or when he had a moment between other work, he was able to pull it out and work on it again. And so when we dedicate space to an endeavor, it exponentially increases our chances of success. It was Seth Godin, I think, who coined the 10,000 hour rule. He said you got to put in 10,000 hours to achieve mastery at anything. And this makes sense to us. We all know practice makes perfect. It's impossible to get good at something without putting in the time and the effort. But what's missing from that common sense formula is that it also takes space. Without dedicating space for an activity, you're swimming against the current. You're swimming against the flow, and you're making it's going to be a lot harder to do that. Um, Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." And so, if you haven't shaped your building to allow you to do a certain activity, it's going to be really hard to do that activity. Your very motions are going to be dictated by the arrangement of the walls. Yogananda said that environment is stronger than willpower. And when I first thought of that, I thought, oh man, I don't like the sound of that. I don't want to feel like I'm not strong enough to overcome my environment, or to win. I don't want to feel like I don't have the power to succeed. But the more I thought about it, it's true because in any given moment, the human will is magnificent. It's indomitable, right? People break records every day. People reach down deep inside and they find the strength or the courage or the will or whatever it takes to overcome their circumstances. People have these incredible breakthroughs. And Instagram and social media are full of those moments. We celebrate the breakthroughs when people overcome the odds, when people break through and get to a success and overcome with their limitations. But the thing is that those are breach moments, like a whale that uses all their swimming power and launches out of the ocean and up into the air. It's very majestic, and that's why we take pictures of it, because those breach moments are like, yes, they remind us of the power and the potential that we all have. But the thing is we're not always living at that level of 100% volume on, right? We're most of the time we're trying to conserve energy and economize. That's what habits are for. That's what routines are for, because they make it so that we don't have to waste a bunch of energy. Decision fatigue. It's like when I come home, my keys go here, my wallet goes here, my jacket goes here, and that way in the morning I'm not running around like a chicken with my head cut off going, hey, where are my keys? I know where my keys are. I've got a system for that, right? So this is our normal state. So after the breach moment, we fall back in. And so when we're normal, when we're tired, when we're going through on autopilot, that's when the environment is going to take its toll. Just like a tree root um, uh, can crack a sidewalk. Wood is not as hard as cement, but that slow, constant pressure 24/7, day after day, year after year, it's gonna, that's the force. So our environment is going to put that constant steady pressure on us. In any given moment, we can overcome the environment, but over time, the environment is going to put an influence on us, whether we're aware of it or not. So the idea behind conscious home design is to say, let's make sure that the environment we shape um, puts a positive influence on us rather than creating, friction points and obstacles for us. We want to put the wind at our back, so to speak. As though like the draft in Tour de France, the guys in the front of the pack, they have to pedal harder because they have to break the wind. The guys behind, they don't have to pedal as hard because they're drafting. Yeah, I want your life to live. I want you to live in a home that feels like you're drafting.
That makes sense. Your home also becomes very, how do I put this? When we walk through our homes or we walk through other people's homes, well, like when I go into clients' homes, for an example, or in their business, I'll notice things and comment about it, and they'll go, "Oh, that thing? I forgot that was even there." Could be a picture, it could be a vase. It could be anything, something that our minds become visually deaf to what's surrounding us, but yet our subconscious picks up on it still. So I would think that what you're talking about and helping people do that can be a soothing thing too, right? A comforting thing, would it not? Like I know you've done some lots of research, and we could probably get into this now, and the Harvard studies and stuff that you reference in regards to adult happiness and what actually makes people happy as they age. So how does
Yeah.
that affect, first off, how are we affected by being blind to what's around us in our home? We stop even looking in that picture anymore. Is it that important to make sure that that environment that we're walking into, even when we stop visually seeing it, is there to be a calming effect? Have they found that that's a calming effect
Mm,
on
mm,
people? And
mm.
go from there if you wouldn't mind in regards to that study as well.
Yeah. Okay. Dwight, I really appreciate that question. No one's ever asked it that way. It's a unique frame that you've put in. Talking about, the when things are no longer new in your environment, the mind again, based on trying to economize energy, says, okay, we know what that is. And so it tunes it out because it's no longer relevant or important to our survival. Right. And so that happens, it's just the natural way of our body trying to economize, and save calories because our brain burns up, 25% of our calories every day just thinking, we've got these big brains compared to, many other creatures in on the earth. So, what we know is that our bodies evolved in nature, not in boxes, and not in buildings. And so, even if you have a very beautifully um, decorated or well appointed or well designed space that makes you feel calm in it, just looking at some green space, has a physiologically measurable effect on us. And even if you're unconscious about it, which is one of the reasons why I like having plants in the home. And it takes three different colors. If you see three different shades of green, three tones of green, so get two or three plants that have different colors. When you see that, the mind calms, the breath becomes more regular, and the heart rate slows and becomes more even, and blood pressure can slow. These are physiological responses that are universal to all humans. And so even if you're not consciously paying attention, that environment can really lower blood pressure and make you feel calmer and put the body at rest. And over decades and years and decades, that's going to have an effect because we know that stress it shortens life expectancy. Interestingly enough, when they showed people cityscapes, which might be, you might say, "Oh, I like that." That's a beautiful. It's nice to look at. You may like looking at things, but it doesn't have the same physiological response. The body was not calmed by looking at cityscapes and the built environment, but like it was when you looked at um, you know, trees or plants or the ocean or a lake or a nature scene. So that's something you can do. is try to bring the outside in, and what if you're able to do it with live plants, great. But if it's just pictures of nature, that works too. Actually, the brain doesn't decipher between, a representation and the real thing. So windows, depending if you have windows that look out into a yard or into some trees, that's great. If you live in the city and your windows look out at another building, then it's doubly important for you to bring pictures of nature into your space, um, or some plants if you can. So that's just
What
a universal
what about fake plants?
physiological thing. What about
Uh,
what plants?
my brain just said, what about fake plants?
Fake plants.
Does it still give you, you know how you come into people's
It does. Yeah.
environments and businesses and homes and they have fake plants? Does it
Yeah.
still do the same thing? Does your brain still trigger in the
It actually
same?
does.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it does trick the brain. I mean, if you look at it and say, "Oh, that plant is fake," that may sort of undo a little bit of
Oh,
that.
okay.
But
Yeah.
if it's a good fake plant, you're just not paying attention to it, then it will send that signal that you're in a natural environment, and that's less stressful for our bodies, for the physical organism. So, as I was researching the book for you know, before I was ready to publish, I came across the Harvard study of adult happiness. I did a lot of research because I wanted data. I didn't want to just come up with, style opinions. Oh, I like green. Oh, I like blue. Oh, I like modern. Oh, I like classic. Those are great, but they're subjective. I wanted objective stuff, and I wanted to focus on that. So, there's actually a lot of good data out there from health, from education, data, but this was about happiness itself. And in 1938, Harvard started this study, and it's still going on today. So it's 87 something years going strong, and they've studied thousands of individuals, and everyone that originally started was over 18 years old, so that all the original participants have passed away, and they're on second and third generations now. But what they did is they uh, did an initial intake form where they said, hey, what's your station in life? Do you come from money? Do you have a nice house or not? What's your health like? They do a physical assessment. What's your mental state? How are you looking at life? And so basically a whole avatar. They got the whole snapshot of a person, and then they tracked them throughout life, and periodically pull them back in to re-up the assessment and say, okay, what's going on in your life now? How are you doing? And so they found that regardless of business success or failure, career changes, ups and downs, health challenges, the stuff that happens in life, they found that none of that really moved the needle. Um, the single biggest predictor of people's longevity, like their life expectancy and how happy they said they were, was their relationships, the quality of their connections. And when I found that out, I said, okay, stop the press. We can't publish this book yet. Without originally I was going to call the book Green Picket Fence, living, the new American dream, instead of a white picket fence.
Yeah.
Living a new American dream of a custom designed eco-friendly home. But um, my core message is deeper than just eco-friendly. It's really about, because you can live in an eco-friendly home, but if it's unconsciously designed from a user experience perspective, if it's not cultivating to the things that make us happy, then then you're not going to be happy. It may not fit. Like the most eco-friendly home might be an igloo. It might be a snow cave up in the top. It's like it's made right around you. That's the most ultimate eco-friendly home. But your opportunity for a long, rich, diverse life is going to be limited. I'm not saying that you can't live a happy life. I'm not saying that people can't be happy and can't have a good life. I'm not there to make judgments or qualifications on that. But most people want more than that. Most people want to have opportunities for, education or travel and all sorts of things. So, we need to find a way to support them, in a more sort of modern way. So, they were very clear in the study that it wasn't limited to romantic relationships that that were the predictors of health and happiness. So I thought, okay, well, what does relationship mean? So I had to spend time going down the rabbit hole of relationship. And the Greeks have seven different words for love, based on what kind of love it is, if it's between parent and child, or between two friends, or between lovers, or between a person in their community, agape or filial or storge or um, eros. They have all these different words for the different qualities. But that wasn't enough. That was just scratching the surface. I wanted to keep going. What I found is that within all of our human experiences, our human relationships and connections that we have, they're going to fall into one of three broad categories, and they're giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships. So, our giving relationships are ones where we are the primary giver, and there are going to be relationships that we have with those that we are teaching or coaching, those that we are like with children, perhaps that we're parenting or raising or educating, even plants and animals. That where we are primarily, taking care of them, our pets or animals outside. If you put a bird feeder up, that's an example of a giving relationship. And so, of course, all of our relationships, there's a give and take. But and that's true. But at face value, that those are giving relationships where we're showing up first as the giver. Then we have our reciprocal relationships, like you and I, Dwight, are having right now, where it's two people standing on equal footings and there's a give and take. And, I don't have to put on a sort of a role model face like I might if with a child if I was teaching them, and I don't have to have that. So I'm able to let my hair down and just be a little bit more natural and have a discussion. So there's a different flavor of relationship there. So these are relationships that we have with our peers, our friends, our colleagues, co-workers, significant others, that kind of thing, where there's an equal give and take. And then our receiving relationships are the ones where we are the beneficiary of someone else's care and wisdom and love and encouragement. So ones that we have with our coaches and our mentors or teachers, our elders and ancestors, our heroes that we get inspiration from, or our spiritual figures. So in conscious home design, I said, if these relationships are essential, and we have to have all three kinds, what would the house look like if um, we intentionally designed to support all three kinds of relationship? As we go through life, we're going to have ups and downs. At different stages in life, you'll have more or less of some types of relationship. When you're in college age, you're not doing a lot of giving. You're hanging out as much as you can with your friends. So it's all these reciprocal relationships, and you're in classes learning. So it's all these receiving relationships. But shortly thereafter, most people, they leave school and they start a family, and now they got young children, and they are just giving, 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 giving. And I hear, young parents say, "Oh my gosh, if I could just get 30 minutes to go hang out with a friend and have an adult conversation, that would be great this week." Right? So it's just we go through balances, but over this course of life, you want to have a healthy mix. And of course, that's up to you as an individual, whether you're introvert or extrovert, and what your expectations are, what makes you happy. You just need to solve that for yourself. But the role of architecture is to create opportunities for all three kinds. So, um, I wanted to go one layer deeper and say, not just have opportunity for all three kinds of relationship in the home. What would it look like if we intentionally created opportunity for all three kinds of relationship in every room of the home? And so this is really where the rubber meets the road. This is where we start getting to some practical steps that anyone can do to start cultivating their space in a way that feeds them, in ways that scientifically the data says this will statistically help you live the longest, happiest, most fulfilled life that you can. This will help you live your best life. And so,
So
um,
just to
yeah, go
interject,
ahead.
yeah, because number one, all that information is fantastic. Like the amount of effort you put in to understand all of this has led you to actually be able to provide people with a healthy home environment, or maybe a work environment too. Like I was going to
Sure.
interject this a while ago. I look at how important architecture is. If companies like Google or the list goes on design specific work environments and walking paths and nature and buildings looking a certain way. You look in the city that I live in, they designed the library a certain way, the city hall a certain way. And then when you walk inside, they're so plain. So they worry about the outside architecture, but you're concentrating and focusing and developing frameworks to develop inside, where you spend a lot of your time so that you get those three relationship frameworks, correct?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're going to spend, at least half of our lives in our home. There may be moments where you're really busy with your career and you're out the door first thing in the morning. You don't get home till later in the evening, and so you're barely at home at all. But that's, for a short episode of life. From birth to death, average person is going to spend at least 50% of their life in their home. And so, it makes sense to focus on that environment because it's going to be so impactful. Um, yeah, for sure. So offices as well. Yes, we're spending there. I registered conscioushomedesign.com when I was writing the book, but I also registered conscious office design. I just have never gone down that rabbit hole. It's just there's too much work just in the homes, for me to go there. So maybe I'll partner
Oh,
with
I
an architect one.
appreciate that. No, I appreciate the fact that you're focusing and having a niche. That wasn't my point. I was bringing up the fact in my experience, especially all my travels around the world and the US. I've been to not as all the states like you. As a Canadian, I've been to pro 24, 25 of the states, and I look at buildings and I think to myself, "Oh, beautiful." And you walk in and the facade is gone. They're sterile, they're very plain and
Mm-hmm.
boring. And I think to
Mm-hmm.
myself, well, you know, architecture, this looks really good. And the architect probably wanted more for the inside, but they disconnected from the architect and they brought in designers, which aren't architects. They're completely
Mm-hmm.
different. They're looking at a space that you designed and saying this is what it needs to be. You're looking at it more on a holistic, this is where you're going to be 50% of your life at home. So we need to put
Mm-hmm.
some conscious effort into it, hence conscious home design.
Yeah.
So worry about the businesses later. I like the idea that you're worrying about people's homes. I really do because
Thanks.
the little nuances when I walk into clients' homes in the last 25 years and like I mentioned and they've stopped seeing that item that I
Uh-huh.
find appreciation for. I'm thinking to myself, well,
Mm.
your subconscious mind still catches it and you've talked
Sure.
about that. So I love how you've
Sure.
integrated that. But at the end of the day, stay focused where you're staying in your wheelhouse. That's what I tell people, right? If you want to
Mm-hmm.
partner with somebody else that does the rest and you got the URL, great. But I'm excited about
Mm-hmm.
hearing more
Mm-hmm.
about, and how this all ties into the framework you've been developing and not just developing, continually bettering
Sure.
it for your own purposes as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, business, as an entrepreneur myself, I like the efficiency of business. And so, the idea that's what office design and storefront design and workplace design is about, economy and efficiency. So that is something that I appreciate, but I prefer closer to my heart is the intimacy of home. It's where we grow, it's where we raise our families, it's where our stories are told. And so that's just so much more deeply meaningful for me personally. So that's why I'm focusing on the homes there. Um, as far as the relationships go, I like to use as an example to illustrate this for people that of having all three types in every single room of the house. There's a room that people traditionally do not think of as being a place to cultivate relationships, and that is the bathroom. The bathroom is usually thought of as a private space. It's where you go to close the door to get away. If you have young children, you just need 5 minutes to breathe for a second, go to the bathroom. If you have a bunch of friends over for dinner and suddenly they start talking about politics and you, and you need to take a break, go to the bathroom and shut the door for a few minutes, right? Like, or if you're an introvert at a party, you just need to, take a moment to recenter. Bathroom is a wonderful place to have some privacy. on the other hand, it's also one of the most ripe environments for us to cultivate our feelings of connection and our sense of self and the way we want to interact with life if it's intentional. So, in the bathroom, an example of giving relationships is that plant. If you have an outside window in your bathroom and you have some natural daylight, put a couple of plants on the windowsill or a little shelf in front of the window or hanging from the top of the window, a little hanging pot. It's very low maintenance. Once a week, take 3 steps from the sink over and give it a little sip of water. Prune off a dead leaf, and then you have a little interaction. And now instead of it just being this a dead space, where you just go in quickly, do your business, and get out, it now has life in there, and it's one step closer to being a garden or an oasis. And if you have a couple of plants, then again, referring back to not only is it cultivating or giving opportunity for the giving relationship, but it's also putting that calming, that physiological effect that seeing the green growing things has on us.
I have a question
It,
before you go on. In regards to the bathroom and
Mhm.
architecture, I find that so many homes don't have a window in their bathroom anymore. Back in the
Yeah,
50s and 60s, it
yeah,
seemed like all of them did. So,
sure,
as an architect, it's so important that people understand that maybe having a window and natural light in that bathroom, because it is a place of solace, can be healthy as well as having those plants. Is that what I'm
sure.
hearing? Like it's better to have windows in a bathroom, or
Well,
because
I
what would you do?
prefer to,
What
yeah,
about my
it's
bathrooms, for example? None of them have windows in them, which really sucks.
oh, that's too bad. Yeah. No, it's really
Yeah.
nice to have windows in the bathroom because A, you can open it up for some fresh air, right? B, you get natural light, and natural lighting is better for color rendering, so if you're looking at artificial light, um, the skin tone that you have and the color of your clothes, it's not 100% compared to what would be in daylight, in natural light. So natural light is helpful, especially for ladies that are wearing makeup, and it helps them with the color and the tone. To see what you look like under natural light is always a preferable solution.
Oh,
If you don't have windows in your bathroom, put in a full spectrum light bulb. A full spectrum light bulb, the plants can live just fine under a full spectrum bulb. And with LEDs, the electricity use is very low these days. You're not gonna run up the bill, the power bill by keeping the light on for a plant to live in your bathroom. Don't worry about that at all. Taking it one step further beyond a plant, what if you had a little fish bowl, with a goldfish swimming around, or a betta fish with the nice fins, and then you come in the morning and you sprinkle a little food. Hi, fish, how are you? And now there's life in there, and you're having a little spark of joy. It's like, all right, you know, that's a fun thing that you could consider doing to foster giving relationships in the bathroom. Now, for reciprocal relationships, it's very common to see, especially in the master bathrooms, two sinks, double bowl sinks. So you can brush your teeth side by side with someone else. And if you're able to, design a home for yourself, do a renovation or build a new home, and it's in your lifestyle, if you want this for yourself, you could easily put in a tub that's big enough for two people, or even a shower room that's large enough with two heads, so two people could shower simultaneously. So you don't have to take turns. It's more efficient, but it's also something you can do together. So there's a
that would
a
be
few options.
reciprocal then, right? If you had that dual shower head,
That's
or
reciprocal. Yeah.
is that reciprocal to a certain desire? Like because
Yeah.
all of a sudden, they both don't have to wait, but you could actually maybe people have conversations. They're
Yeah. I mean,
showering and talk about their
well,
day
I
or
I would
something.
consider, even if you're side by side at sinks brushing your
Yeah.
teeth and you're not talking because your mouth is full of brush and paste, it's still
Yeah.
a reciprocal relationship. You're still in proximity with another person.
Oh,
People
okay.
can You can be having a relationship with someone even if you're not talking. Like
Oh,
two people can be in proximity to each other. One person's doing the crossword puzzle, the other one's reading a book. You're not engaging, but you're together. You're still spending time together. That's still a quality of relationship. And so
okay.
I would say that showering together, it does, separate. It's separate. You each have your own shower head, and you're doing your business. You're not having sexy time. This is just, washing the body, right? But
Yeah.
that still is cultivating that relationship. Not everyone will choose that. It's just an option to consider,
I
as
just
a
wanted
lifestyle choice.
clarification of the reciprocal, so I appreciate you
Sure,
breaking that
sure.
down because if I had even a little hint of doubt, somebody else could too. So I appreciate the
Mm,
clarification of
yeah.
that.
No, no problem at all. Thanks for asking the question. Um, Moving on to like a reciprocal relationship, or a receiving relationship in the bathroom. This is where I think you can take a photograph of someone that loves you, or someone that has some encouraging or inspiring words for you, and get their image up, somewhere near the bathroom where, when you're washing your face or brushing your hair, you can glance at it, and take a moment and say, there it is. And it reminds you of that feeling that you want, that feeling of being supported or encouraged or loved, or whatever flavor of receiving relationship feels good to you, that is personally meaningful for you. Choose that photo, and if you're in a situation where it's like, well, I'm Catholic and my partner is Jewish, and we can't figure out, we can't agree on a whose image to put up there, or have different families or whatever, then choose your own images. You have his and hers, or his and his, or you can each have your own. Or if you want to agree on one, maybe having a photo is too prominent. Maybe just a quote, a quote that you can tape above the mirror, and you could look at that and it's always repeat it like an affirmation. And so there is a level of intentionality, because over time, you brought it up before. If you see it and you don't pay attention to it, it will disappear into the background. It will become familiar. It's not new. And so the brain will start to ignore it. And so there's an element of intentionality behind it. If you make it a practice to gaze at that photo or repeat the affirmation once or twice, every day, then it's a moment to remind yourself of what's important to you. It's a moment of being present. And from that place of encouragement, or feeling loved, of support and security, then what's that going to do to your mental state, and what kind of ripples is that going to send out when you engage the world, when you go out, when you leave the bathroom and start to engage with life, what kind of energy are you going to bring to the
So
circumstance,
you're
right?
talking about that spiritual connection because that's one thing I had read about you, like linking our inner spiritual lives with that outer physical space. So we go into that bathroom, we see that affirmation, we see that picture of loved ones or whatever.
Hmm,
That can
hmm.
makes us feel good, but it also grounds us spiritually, right? In our spiritual connections with ourselves. Like, could you explain some of that as well?
Sure.
How our
Yeah.
physical environment ties into, because you're talking about it affecting our emotionally, but how does it affect us
Right.
spiritually?
Well, spiritually is different than socially, right? So if you have a picture of a hero or a teacher, or a parent or elder up there, then that might just be a social cue,
Okay.
as opposed to a spiritual cue. A spiritual cue is going to be something, our mind and our emotions are not the same as sort of your soul. As I need to be very careful, because I'm an architect, and I need to stay within my lane and in my area of expertise, right? I'm not a counselor, and I'm not a doctor, or a therapist or a priest, and so I need to I need to not talk too deeply about those things, because it's outside of my zone of expertise. I just know that those things are factors, and if we can
Okay.
incorporate them, we want to. And so I'm not here to tell you, hey, you should have a spiritual thing, or I'm not telling you what
You're
connections to
just
have.
using
I'm just
examples. Absolutely.
Right. I'm just
Yeah, I
saying the
appreciate
data
that.
says if you have these relationships, that's very helpful. And it's up to you to decide which relationships you want to encourage and cultivate. Once,
Okay.
so I ask the questions, and then once you say, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, I want to have this relationship, I want to play the trumpet, I want to have an opportunity for, to study or to write the next book or to study this thing, then I say, okay, great, create space that's going to support you in those activities. So it's really, that's
So it ties
that's
into
focus.
your workbook. One of your first questions is asking about values, right? Core values and
Yeah.
stuff. So you're
Hmm.
you're being that person that's giving people an opportunity, whether you have your preconceived ideas of what things should be, you're letting them tell you this is who I am, and then navigating and helping them with a roadmap to develop their home so that it fits their values, their value systems. Obviously, with your experience, you can say, well, what about this? You haven't thought about that, right? Same thing as me. I ask
Sure.
because I love core values. I love talking to people about their values. So I was really intrigued by that part of your work, right? Really wanting
Yeah.
to know what people are looking for.
Thanks, Dwight. So some architects are really, they're artists, right? And they come up with a style and that's their thing. And you can go to their website and it's just pictures of their work. And they, hey, and all the homes, look similar. They have a style that they like. Frank Gehry, he just passed away, but he doesn't do homes, he does buildings, but they all have this shiny titanium undulating thing. That's his style. He's an artist. People hire him because they see that and they say, "Oh, I want that art." If you ask him to do something different, he can't give it to you. He's focused on a style. Conscious home design is not about a style. Conscious home design is about the individual and saying, you're going to get whatever style you want. That's a given. Of course, we can give you the style, but let's focus first on the activities, the universal activities that all humans need, and then on top of that, we build the individual activities. How does creative expression show up for you? How does personal development show up for you? How does, is inner development? Is that something where you're cultivating your mind, or is that something where you're cultivating your spirit? Do you want a prayer room at home for meditation and worship? Or do you want a study at home where you can, educate yourself and do professional development, right? These are two different forms of personal development, and so it's up to you to decide what you want, and then my job is just to help shape space to deliver that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
awesome. That's
yeah.
that's so great though. It excites me just listening to you talk about all this stuff, and I'm
Thanks,
thinking
Dwight.
about you're welcome. I'm thinking about my own home. I'm thinking about my adult kids because my kids are all adult now, and it seems like I don't know if this is even a great question to ask, but is this a gender issue at all? Because I find women when I go into go into their homes, they do things a lot differently when there's a woman inside the home in regards to visualization or the plants and that. And me as a
Mhm.
divorced dad in my house, I've got specific things I've picked. But I find some of the most interesting things that I've done in my house are because of my sisters or my mom or lady friends that come over that say things to me. Oh, you've got a good style, Dwight, but what about this? What about that? So is there
Right.
any, not to get away too far from it, but is this gender
Sure.
related as well?
um I think there is some biological nesting that happens with women, because of the idea, not the idea, but because of the um, it sort of goes with the territory of having a womb, and raising children, right? It's like there's this need, it's instinctual. There's an instinctual need to nest and create a safe environment to raise, vulnerable life. And so, I think women generally will have a little bit more, will pay more attention or have a little bit more sensitivity to the home environment, whereas men are, not wired the same way generally. And that's not to say that there aren't women who don't pay much attention to the home space because they're just very focused on something else. And it's not to say that there aren't men who deeply focus on the home, on cultivating, a nice home, right? So it's not it, there probably is a slight leaning, there's probably
Yeah.
slightly more women are more interested than men, but it's certainly not dramatically skewed. It's not like
Okay.
90%, 9 out of 10 women want it and only 10% of men want it. It's nothing dramatic like that.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever had that asked. It was just something I thought because I raised my kids as a single dad and I had this house built and I wish I would have had somebody specialized or had like the workbook. Again, I never had a chance to go through it all.
Mhm.
But some of the
Sure.
things that I utilize in my own finance practice to figure out people's desires, their dreams, to make sure I do the right things for them. Um, are similar in the fact that you have to ask good questions. And one of those questions was the fact that I was just curious if this would be gender slanted at
Yeah.
all, because I've had more advice. My dude friends come in, or family, my dad, or uncle, uncles, aunts, brother-in-laws, and they don't go like, "Oh, wow, this is awesome." It's always the ladies, right? Or they'll say, "Have you ever thought
Uh-huh.
of doing this?" So that's why I
Uh-huh.
wanted to
Uh-huh.
interject and ask you that question
Right.
because
Yeah.
maybe somebody else is thinking that. So thank
Yeah,
you for your answer, though.
it's a great question. Yeah, sure. I appreciate your questions a lot, actually. They're very thoughtful and surprisingly, not asked by very many people. There are a lot of questions that I get over and over. They're this very common questions, but you tend to be answering ones that are slightly more unusual, which I really find which I really appreciate. What happens more often than not that I notice is not that more women than men are interested in conscious home design. I find that there's a pretty good mix of people, sort of clicking on my content online of men and
Wow.
women. Because men do want to shape their homes, because men, conscious home design is sort of positioned um, as a path to success. If you have goals in life, if you want to shape your future, if you want to, intentionally arrive at your destination, if you want to, this is the way to set your GPS coordinates. And so I think that's a human desire is to live their best life, with some intention. So broadly it's applicable to everyone. But
Well, I
as I'm
guess
designing,
I answered that question too, though. Sorry to cut you
yeah,
off because I'm a
it's okay.
dude, I'm a man
Yeah.
with a podcast that was interested in having you on because I find this intriguing. So I guess I kind of
Right.
answered my own question too.
That's good. That's a
I
nice
just thought I'd
point.
bring that up to the listeners and viewers, right? If you're watching this or listening to this, I just find this stuff intriguing, right? And I like
Yeah.
growing in my mindset as a man, but most men in my life aren't like me.
Uh-huh. Sure. Sure. Well, we all have our unique qualities, and everyone walks their own path in life. One of the things that's a challenge for most any residential architect really who's designing homes for couples is that you can have style conflict. One person might want, like this color or this style, and the other person might like a different color or a different style. And so trying to come up with something, you like a traditional couple, for example, you know, especially younger, people that are younger in life, you can have something that's very much the quintessential bachelor pad. It's not very welcoming for a woman, and but neither does a man want to live in a, you don't want to have Castle Grayskull meet Barbie Palace. You know what I mean? Like, neither person is going to be comfortable in that environment. So trying to create, master bedrooms and living room spaces and common shared spaces that are going to be comfortable for everyone living there is really important. There's a bit of art to doing that, because if you're saying, hey, I want to cultivate relationships and I want to spend good quality time with my family in the family room, but one person was the driving decision maker behind the design of that family room and everyone else hates it, you're not going to have, you're not fostering harmony in the home, so
Yeah,
there's a bit
that
of,
makes
there's a,
sense.
yeah.
That
So
makes sense.
with the workbook, I like to have everyone in the whole house do the workbook,
Oh, I didn't know that.
independently, so that I can see everyone's own answers and then try to find ways to harmonize that and help them, curate their space. Yeah. Even kids, if they're over 5 years old, sit there and have their parents ask them some questions and let's find out what the kid
Oh,
wants, and see if there's a way to let them feel included. Yeah. It's
that
their home too.
I can see that elevating the whole family chemistry though. Going through this process with you sounds very cathartic and holistic and healing for people too, because everybody is involved. And I'll use my own example. When I got this house built, I sat with the builder's architect and I said I wanted certain things. They weren't really anywhere close to where you're at. But they were saying, "Oh, do this, do that," because I was building the house, five kids, single dad, and I let them pick their colors, and they thought that was exciting. I brought the big paint
Sure.
things in because
Yeah.
I had a designer come in and we went through all the tiles, all the things that people see on TV on your Magnolia or Home Network or whatever. I
Yeah.
had that. I had somebody, we went through, oh, okay, this is your tile. This is, no, I don't like that. Okay, I want my kids to pick their rooms. Oh, why would you do that? What happens
Yeah.
if you don't like it? I said, but that's not my environment. As long as it's not
And
so offensive. And one of my
sure.
daughters picked lily pad green for a bedroom, pardon me, for an example. Lily pad, right? And
Yeah.
she was only, I don't know, 10 at the time, 9, 10, when I got full custody of him. And, I look at that and I think about what you're saying. Wow, I could have had so much more positive energy in my home had I known somebody like you, as opposed to just people that want to sell me a service. Yes, use this tile. Yes, use this paint. No, you should put this room here. You know what I mean? Like I felt like
Right.
I was just a digit. Does that make sense? I didn't feel connected in the
Completely.
process.
Yes, yes, completely. And so that works for people that, again, for the artist style architect or designer who has, this is my style, like take it or leave it, and then so if you hire them, is you have to basically give up the process and let them deliver what they deliver, what they're good at. That's their niche. And if it works for you, it works for you. But if you want something else, something truly custom, then you need to work with someone who has room in their model, in their relationship with the client for that. So, it comes down to efficiency as well. There's certain formulas that we have to walk a client through, sort of that client journey, based on, the steps that we know that work. For instance, if you give someone too much time and say, hey, go find some tile for here, you know, a client it can be 3 months before you hear back from them. They're going to be like, "Oh, I got overwhelmed with trying to find a tile." And so, if you come as a designer and say, "Look, here are 3 tiles that could work very well for this space. Can you choose one?" Now you narrow down their choices, and it's much, it keeps things on time. It keeps things timely. And so, there's a little bit of hand holding or guidance that can happen. At some point, you have to narrow it down and make a commitment to something. So I don't want to say that the practice of design or what they walked you through was bad. I wasn't there. I can't judge them.
Oh, I'm not
You
saying they
did
were bad either. I'm just saying,
customization.
after
Yeah,
listening to
sure.
you, I wish I would have had more, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you for validating the work. Um, you know, take some time with the workbook, and you're going to be living in your home for many years. You may get some inspirational ways to just do little shifts around here and there. I don't go recommending paint colors in there, although there's a lot of work behind paint colors, in terms
Oh,
of the
there is,
psyche
eh?
that takes on people's. Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Different colors show different effects physically on people's body. For instance, there's one color, we call it Baker Miller pink. It's a shade of pink that they found. Yeah, they found that it made people calm. And they were doing this thing where they were using it in prisons actually. And when
Wow.
people who were just um, very disturbed, very volatile, and would be in a rage, uncontrollable, just out of control, not able to contain the emotions that they had. They would stick them in a small room that floor, walls, and ceilings was all painted Baker Miller pink, and within 20 minutes they're calm, resting heart rate, everything done. And they found it was universally true. It's
Wow.
just seeing this color has a physical effect on the body, Baker Miller pink. But there's so much work done on color therapy and different things like there is preferences, but there's also some biological things like the three shades of green, seeing the greenery
Oh
on
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
plants, right?
yeah.
Blue and green. Blue is the sky, and green as growing things. Those colors, the natural colors there with pops of flowers, like roses or sunflowers, those yellows and reds and things. Those give us calm and peace, but also a little joy to see those things. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you want the whole room to be blue. That might be too much or overwhelming. It may be, too much of a good thing is not necessarily good. Like sugar is good, but you don't want to just start eating it by the spoonful, right? It's just too much. And so, there is an art to choosing and selecting and delivering these things, and that's why you work with a designer, someone who that's their career focus. Yeah.
One of the things before we get too far away from it, you talked about you deal with people, and I'm just looking down at my notes that I had put before we started this. I wanted to ask
Sure.
you because it kind of came up in regards to building new, because we talked about
Uh-huh.
that, or then somebody redecorating their home. Do you
Yeah.
do you get into, because again, I haven't gone that far into it, so I need to ask the question. Maybe somebody's wondering. So if you were coming in and I was dealing with you and you were helping me with my space, right?
Yeah.
This home that's been here for 18 years now, do you recommend sometimes as something as forceful as, oh, you should redesign this room, you should get rid of this wall, you should do this? Like, I know they talk about it on all those design shows. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
that kind. I mean,
Hmm.
do you get into the fact that this space is not, no matter what we do to it, it's not going to be conducive to emotional and spiritual whatever growth? Is that a little bit too
Yeah.
much of a question to ask?
No, that's a great question. It's very relevant. So, look, conscious home design, meets you wherever you are. If you're living in a rental property and you have no ability to change walls around, your landlord might not even allow you to repaint and change the color of a wall, right? Your lease terms may be just you can't do anything other than hang up pictures and place furniture. In that circumstance, we're going to go through starting with the relationships and core values and things that you like to do, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. We're going to go around and look for opportunities to enhance those things. Any gaps that are missing in your life. Let's see if there's things we can do just by arranging furniture and space and the way we partition off space, the way what we see, what images, what relationships we're cultivating, plants, uh, ancestors, elders, that kind of stuff strategically placed in the home to give you those moments. I like to put things, like I said, in the bathroom, by the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth, and also by the front door. So before I go out into the world, I can take a pause. Like you can put a mirror just to check your appearance to make sure you don't have, something, your collar's turned up the wrong way, or something as you go out the door.
Stop
But you can
sucking your
also
teeth.
yeah, right. So you can have a mirror to check your appearance before you go out the door, but you can also have an affirmation or a photo of someone that gives you inspiration. It can just anchor you back again, or a picture of your family, whatever gives you strength, whatever motivates you to be a good person in life, put put a reminder of that by the front door as you walk out. And conversely, when you open the front door to come in, what do you see on the wall? What's there to remind you, oh, I'm home, my values. But also guests, what are your guests going to see when they come? Whatever you display, you're basically saying this is what's important to me. These are my values. So we can do very surface level stuff that are deeply meaningful and have, dividends, over you that have a payback in your life.
So that little
But
subtle
it
thing can make a huge difference.
it can when done intentionally.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
Little these are just little 2% shifts that you can do.
Yeah.
What if you did a 2% shift in every room of your house and it added up? And it's like, well, what if every day I felt 8% better, 8% happier, 8% more connected, 8% more like my life is possible. Like I felt 8% more possibility in my life, or that my future, that my destiny, is within reach or within my capacity to guide. Yes, this is what's that going to do over time. Think about compounding interest. I know you help with people with financial planning, right? The the difference between a 5% interest rate and a 7% interest rate over 30 years is life changing, right? We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just from a 2% shift in increase of rate of return with the compounding. And so over years and decades in a space, what kind of dividends are you going to get if every day you felt a few percentage points better? Yes, it can be dramatic. Now, so it's conscious home design meets you where you are. It's not all or nothing. It's not, hey, I have to have a brand new house designed for me or it's no good. No, even if you're renting a space, we can work with you.
That's why I wanted to
And
bring it up. I
yeah,
figured the listeners need to understand that, right? Those little
yeah,
nuances in our questions or our responses are important because if they think it's only about new or used or whatever, I like the fact that you said,
right.
"Hey, even if you're a renter, we can still do something
Yeah,
for you." So
that's right.
you're a one-stop shop, and I like that. You're
Sure, absolutely.
right.
You sort of choose your own adventure. If you just have no plans to hire an architect, because most people don't. Most people won't hire an architect. Most people will live in a home that's already built, and they'll just move into it, and they'll do the best they can with the walls they're given. Um, so obviously for me to help people live their best life, I have to be able to work within that context. And so these are the things that are through my research we know are rooted in science that can be helpful for that. So little shifts can lead to big impacts, just like the butterfly effect, right? The mathematician, he wrote, "Do the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil eventually set off a tornado in Texas?" And so that's not always true. Not every time a butterfly flaps their wings, it becomes a tornado, but it can be true. The math shows that there's a cause effect relationship and like a snowball effect. And what it tells us is that, big results are always dependent on sensitive initial conditions. Tiny beginnings lead to big results. Every big result had a tiny beginning. So that's the idea between conscious home design is like, let's start with a bunch of positive tiny beginnings and see what happens in your life.
So you talked
Now,
about the
if
butterfly effect. Sorry,
yeah,
I want to ask you a little bit more about so those
sure.
little nuances that so many of us because you talked also about me being in finance. You're right, compounding interest. We talk about all these little nuances. People listening and watching, it's not just in finance. You've heard me talk about this because my podcast isn't about finance. It's about discovering unique, wonderful people like you that have given a heck and changing people's lives through those little nuances. And I love the tie-in effect because I talk to people about their values. I talk to them about goal setting. I talk to them about those little small little things can make a difference. And they'll say to me, "Well, nobody's ever told me that." Well, guess what?
Hmm.
Taylor,
Hmm.
nobody's ever told me this stuff. And the listeners and viewers, nobody's ever told you this either, most likely. In life, little small things add up, right? And that's what I wanted to bring up. And with home
Yeah.
design and the fact that you can help anybody from A to Z, A to Z, whatever country you're in,
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
just it excites me that there's so much commonality in what I do to what you do. We're out to serve and help people. We're gonna fit within what they need, not necessarily push them into, a square hole. They got a square
Hmm.
and got a round block trying to get it in there, right? So I like that. I just wanted to bring that
Hmm.
up that people listening, those little small steps and anything you want to change in your life, whether it's your home environment, your finances, your health, nutrition, it starts at one step. And having a person that can mentor and coach you, like, Taylor with the home stuff, is just amazing.
This is a truth that's applicable throughout different disciplines and practice. This idea that, making subtle shifts and adjustments, whether like think about the gymnast, who's in the Olympics, it's like their coach will be just saying, just look, just change this little tweak, this little thing, and it's like the difference between sticking the landing and landing off balance, so little shifts, cultivated intentionally can really make a big difference. And so it's true for whatever field of human endeavor you're in, right? And I appreciate, you and I are aligned. Our work is similar because we don't have a one size fits all, thing that we're selling. We're not out there hawking a widget. It's like all I have is is to sell this one thing, and I'm just looking for people that I could that it will fit or that can fit into that. It's like you and I are more recognizing the individual journey and the
The
individual
relationship,
process.
yeah, the relationship of who we're dealing with, right? That connection. And understanding
Yeah,
we're all unique like our fingerprints and don't treat people like they should be shoved into this hole, right? That they deserve to
sure.
be shine and be unique. Obviously, if there's something that's really crazy, you're going to say, but it's wordsmithing. A lot of people don't know how to do that either when they're dealing with and your I'm trying to think of the word now, your end user of your
Uh-huh.
product or service. Sometimes the wording is just like, that's interesting. I like that. But have you ever thought of this? Right? Hopefully we're in tune enough with ourselves that we can still talk to people and get the end result that's best for them without them even knowing that it's best for them. That makes any
Hmm.
sense what I just said.
I view architecture as a service profession, and so this is
Yeah.
about me, helping people get what they want. It's about them living happily ever after. I'm not the one who's going to be living in your home. I will always tell you what I think. I'll always share if I think something is a good idea or not, or if they say if they're committed, like, no, I absolutely want to have carpet in the bathroom. I'll tell them, here's what's good about that, and here's the potential challenges with that. It's your house, but I just want you to know that you're making an educated guess. And so I'll give them my view of my professional perspective from my experience and having been down that road before. But in the end, it's up to them. They say, no, just really want that warm, cozy thing under my feet. And so, okay, great. So it's ultimately the final decision is in their hands. But I try to offer the perspective so that they can make informed decisions, informed
That's
choices.
that's great though. I've got two more questions. We're gonna have to wrap the show up. We could talk for hours. This is
Yeah,
this
we can do a
is
part two
ex
for sure. We're just
this is
scratching the
exactly
surface.
oh, of course. This is exactly what I thought it was gonna be and more, to be honest with you. So one of the things that you talk about is something called the again, this might be tied to the bathroom issue or having windows, the sunny window effect. Could you go into
Mm,
that more in detail?
yeah. The sunny window effect is it's a little independent of the bathroom example that I was using there. Sunny window effect. So when I was a kid, um, I noticed that, sitting in a room, reading a book, and if the sunlight came through the window, it was the family pet, whether it was the dog or the cat, would always go and curl up right in that sun patch, and then if a cloud floated by and suddenly the room got dim, and then the cloud moves past and the sunbeam comes in and the room brightens up again. I noticed what that was like. And I found that even a well decorated, very nice, inviting space or room, um, I found that when the sun was shining in, it was even that much more welcoming. And the animals intuitively go for the sun, and so do we. We are drawn to the light. Light is life. And so the sunny window effect is just an acknowledgement that we're drawn to it. That rooms are more attractive when the sun is streaming in. And so we can put that to our advantage in a number of ways. Um, let's say that you had here's a common one that I find a lot of people, especially up in these northern climates, we have to dig down below frost, and so houses commonly have basements, and that's typically, a utility space, and people want something that people are doing a lot is turning them into home gyms, and they're putting their exercise equipment down there. And I think that's a great step because giving yourself an opportunity to exercise, especially with cold winter months, to give yourself time to do. And if you don't have time to commute to the gym, because if it's 20 minutes to get to the gym, it's like it's 40 minutes of commuting and you haven't even worked out yet. It's like who has time to do that, right? So having it accessible in your own home to be able to exercise your body is very powerful. Again, going back to like Leonardo da Vinci, and dedicating space for an activity exponentially increases your chances of success. So having a home gym, having a way to move your body in the house is very healthy. However, if you only got 5 or 10 minutes, in the morning or at the end of the day, you come home and you're just feeling a little tired and like, oh man, I had a tough day. I just need to nurture myself. I just want to take a hot bath and have a cup of tea. I don't want to go down into my torture dungeon and make myself sweat and have sore muscles and everything. It's like, so if you're going to just shut the door and be like out of sight, out of mind, and not do it, the space is, it's dark. It may have a musty scent smell to it. It's just not a very welcoming space. And so people end up creating these torture dungeons. I like to call them jokingly. And so it's still better than nothing because you do have access, and when you're feeling good, you will go down there and use it. But it's not optimal. If you're the type of person who feels a real resistance, and there's a getting over the exercise hurdle is a challenge for you, then in conscious home design, I'll ask the question, well, okay, instead of just putting a bunch of weights or treadmills or equipment that feels like a chore, is there some way that you like to move your body that you actually enjoy doing? Maybe you like to do some sort of yoga stretching. Maybe you like to do a martial arts workout, or tai chi. Maybe you like to do some sort of dance, whether it's a structured formal dance or a free form boogaloo. You just like to put on some tunes and move your body. Dancing is still a physical activity. So find something that you like to do, or once upon a time liked to do, that you could rekindle, or something that you've never done but you always wanted to do. And so let's think about something that gives you some inherent inspiration or motivation to do it. And then let's dedicate space for that activity in a room that has sunlight coming in. If you tell me I like to do my exercise first thing in the morning when I get up, that's when I feel it's like, let's put it in the east of the house so that it's going to get that morning sunlight. If you say, no, I like to do it at the end of the day after I finish my work, that before dinner, it's like, okay, great, let's get it in the southwest, so that it's going to have sunlight coming in there. Then what happens is you're working with the patterns of nature, and you're creating an inviting, welcoming space. You're using the sun to sort of invite you in and welcome you in. And so you're sort of reducing a friction point, to help you succeed in your goal. So the sunny window effect can be used for any activity. I'm using the exercise one because it's a very common challenge that people have, is maintaining their exercise goals. People is a reason why every single New Year's people reset a New Year's resolution. Oh, I'm going to go to the gym. It's the biggest spike of the year in gym memberships happens in January, right? It's like everyone knows they should do this, and yet not everyone is able to maintain it. So this is an example of how you can put the sunny window effect to work for you. But it could be for, if you're home office, if you're just not feeling very motivated, you get in there, it's like, I just don't, do you have a sunny window in your home office? Does it feel like it's a place that's inspiring, it's uplifting? Get some plants, get some sun, and feel like, oh, I'm going into a place that feels, that energizes me. That's the sunny window effect.
Adding to that, I have a home office, right?
Yeah.
And it's got a window, but unfortunately it faces north, right?
Sure.
I sooner come out and work at my kitchen table, right? You can see stuff behind me. I got this I feel more welcoming because this whole side of my house is windows. And I can, and
Yeah.
back to what you talked about earlier in the
Yeah.
conversation, trees. I can see
Yeah.
nature. There's different colors.
Right.
Well, right now it's winter, right? You got snow on the ground and there's no
Sure.
leaves, but I feel more. I never realized how much more welcoming. People say, "Well, why do you work out there so often? Why don't you work in the office?" Because it's just, I don't know. I feel better out here, right?
That's
So,
right.
thank you
Yeah.
for confirming to myself that,
Yeah.
right, nature is important to see, change, the birds, whatever, and
Yeah.
windows, and this faces west, so when the sun
Right.
comes around, yeah. Thank you.
So you have a space that's dedicated as your office, yet you are instinctively seeking out the space that is better, that makes you feel more motivated, more inspired, and more energized to actually do your work. And that's not the room that's dedicated for your office. And
Exactly.
that's an example of, I don't want to be disparaging, but that's an example of unconscious design. See, in conscious home design, I would say, where are you, if you're going to work at home, what hours of the day are you working? Where should we put that? How do we, it's not just enough to give you all the spaces. Hey, I got an exercise space, I've got a home office, I got a bedroom, I got a bathroom. It's about arranging them in such a way that there's flow. Some spaces want to have connection, some want to have isolation. If you, for instance, if you like to play the saxophone, well, you don't want that next to the kid's bedroom because the only time you have to practice is after they go to bed at night and you're going to be keeping them up. So you have to have some isolation and put that on the other side of the house,
Yeah.
so that you're not bothering them. Otherwise, you won't get to practice, even if you've dedicated a music room. And so it's about sensitivity to flow throughout the day, arranging the spaces in such a way. So that's some of the art of putting the science to work for you. That's my job, is to help with that.
Well,
So
and you've done a great job of explaining it. And yes, we can certainly look at having another episode in the future. I keep on smiling. Those watching this, I've been smiling throughout the whole episode because I'm having these little light bulb moments and these epiphanies, like I talked about with my own home office, which is gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. It's a big space, but there wasn't conscious design. And again, I'm not being critical of the original architects that I dealt with the builder. They here's a bunch of homes. Let's pick this one. Okay, this is what will allow you to change. Blah blah blah. And well, I want a dedicated office. Besides all the 5 bedrooms, I want a dedicated office. And
sure.
and I thought it was great, but what I never thought that nobody thought was the placement of the house with the way that it had to be placed in this keyhole cul-de-sac that I'm in. The
Hmm.
window, when the house was done and I go in the office, I look out and go, oh damn, I see the house right beside me. It faces north. Yes, I can see some of the sky, but it just felt gloomy. And
It's
for the
not an
last
inspiring view. Yeah.
18, yeah, for the last 18 years, whether I was at the business office or I decided I was working at home, now I work at home all the time. I don't need to have a brick and mortar location. I just love being out here because I got all my windows. I can watch my squirrels running around out in my backyard. And wow,
Uh-huh.
this has been such an inspirational conversation. Like I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to ask you the last question, and we're gonna have to wrap up this episode, and we'll get together again. Thank you for your information. So the last question, Taylor, if you could give our listeners one last message, something that
Yeah.
proves to them it's always worth giving a heck and never giving up, what would that message be?
Ah, uh, Dwight, I believe that happy people are better citizens. Make if you know happy people are better neighbors. And so, my goal is to help people live happily ever after. If I can help people, if you're miserable, then you don't really care if your house is built out of sustainable materials or if it's energy efficient. You don't have bandwidth for that. You're facing with your personal challenges. And so what I like to do is find ways to have your home be more supportive, so that so that you feel like life is possible for you, and that is going to give you a sense of it's light. It makes you feel lighter, less like oppressive. If the walls aren't closing on you, suddenly you have room to stretch into your potential. This is a recipe, a formula for happiness. And from that happy place, you can then, happy people can then start to look out, oh, how is my life affecting the world around me? Miserable people don't care about the person around them because they're focused on themselves. They're having a hard time. They're having a hard go of it. They need compassion. They're not thinking of others yet. And so happy people suddenly find themselves in a place where they can start being sensitive to the world around them, whether that's the environment or their neighbors. And so happy people are better citizens. And so it's like world peace, let it begin with me. Think globally, act locally. And so I would say the final message to leave people for giving a heck is to do an assessment of your existing space, whatever that is. Look at your opportunities for relationship and connection. Identify any gaps and say, do I want more of that in my life? Would that make me feel a little happier, a little more connected? And then make a little shift, make a little change, and see if that makes a difference for you, and then live happily ever after.
I love that. I love that. I wrote down happy people, better citizens. Like I've been writing down stuff throughout our whole conversation. Yeah, this has been amazing. What's the best way for people to reach you besides your conscioushomedesign.com website, or is that the best place to go to?
Well, I'm on social media, but the Conscious Home Design website is direct. There's a contact me form. First people could buy a copy of the book and the workbook and the audiobook there if they wanted to. It's both available as a physical copy and an instant digital download. Um, but there's also a contact me form. So if someone wanted me to do a consultation with them, a private consultation, that's fine. If they happen to be looking for an architect, 'cause they're doing a major renovation project or building a new home, either they have a growing family, they need more space, or they're downsizing, they're empty nest, the kids are gone, and they want a size appropriate home. I'm certainly happy to help. I've got projects all over. But anyway, there's a contact me form there at conscioushomedesign.com. So that's the best place to go to either get in touch with me directly or just buy a copy of the book and do a little DIY
Or find out
exploration.
which are the best five plants. I like that when I clicked on the website. It has a
Yeah,
pop-up
yeah,
window, people. You can put in
yeah.
your email address and find out what the best five plants are. I smiled when I seen that. I thought, that's pretty cool. So I
Yeah,
wanted
there's
to
a
bring that
free,
up.
yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah,
bring that up, right? Give you a little bit more of a
thanks.
plug. Oh, of course,
That's nice. Yeah,
brother.
there is a freebie. There's an infographic that I have that you could, it's an exit pop. As you're about to leave the page, it pops up and you can enter your name and email and get the 5 best plants for indoor air quality. So, and plants again have the physiological calming effect, but it's also the nurturing a giving relationship. So and the air quality. So it's a triple win, putting more plants in the home. So,
I love that. Those new to the Give a Heck podcast, because I do get new people coming on, whether you're watching or listening, go to giveaheck.com, go to the podcast at the top, and you will see a picture of Taylor, and I'll make sure the show notes will include all his connections, all his contacts for social media, his website. There'll be chapter summaries for this episode, as well as the full unedited transcript, because I do have people that like reading. So you can go to the chapter summaries. You can say, oh, this was I was driving and I really wanted to hear what Taylor was saying. You'll be able to look in the chapter summaries and go and watch that section or go and listen to it easily on your favorite podcast platform. Um, One-stop shop. You don't have to worry about if you're driving, oh, geez, I gotta try to find this. Just go to my website. You'll find out everything you need to know to connect to Taylor. Because why would you not want to move forward to find out more about how important your environment is? I knew it was important, but not to this extent. And I've had so many epiphanies and light bulb moments through this conversation, Taylor. I really appreciate it. I'll give you one last opportunity to add any last final words before I close up the show. Anything else you'd like to add?
no, just thank you very much for allowing me to come on and share a little knowledge with people. It's really my honor and privilege to do so. So thank you.
Yeah. And you're welcome. You're great. You're a great guest. I really appreciated the way that you articulate and the flow and the sharing of your information and knowledge has been appreciated. So thank you so much. So that was Taylor, a licensed architect, best-selling author, and creator of the conscious home design method. His work reminds us that our homes are more than structures. They are our instruments for living, shaping our happiness, health, and relationships. If this conversation moved you, share it with someone who wants to create a home that truly supports their life. Subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and help amplify voices like Taylor's that inspire intentional living. Until next time, keep giving a heck about your life. And remember, no matter what stage you are at in life, it's never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.